It's your boy Ace High. Took a little hiatus. Been going through certain things. Lost the TV. It was just a weird month of July, to be honest with you. But we're back with another video, and we're gonna watch something a little bit more nostalgia. I like nostalgia, especially being that I'm a '90s kid. I love '90s stuff and early 2000s stuff. I feel like that was those were the best eras and best years of my life. So we're about to watch some now, and the video is called "What Made the '90s Look So '90s." Let's check it out. All right.
Why does everything look so grey lately? This is a McDonald's today, and this was one from the 90s. What felt like 10 years ago is now actually 30 years ago, and it's
just the first couple seconds, huge difference. Like, I don't go to McDonald's now. Like, I don't even, unless like there's nothing else to eat, or I'm just need something quick. And even then, dead ass, I do not go to McDonald's at all now. But as a kid in the 90s and early 2000s, like, that was the red top, the playhouse, whatever it was called, the best, hands down the best. The brown looks so corny. Like, I ain't gonna lie. Like, look how that looks so blah. I mean, then you just look at that, you're like, man, that looks so cool and friendly. It was like, I don't know. And it's like, I feel like the dirtier it was, the best the food tastes too. That's the crazy part. Like,
is in the time periods. Today we live in an era of optimization. Everything is data-driven, brand-managed, and designed by an algorithm to be as inoffensive as possible. Yeah. And in that process, we lost the soul of design.
Yes, we did.
The 90s looked incredible, bright, cool, and alive. Not alive like a polished Instagram feed, but alive because nothing was optimized yet. Nothing was constrained by global guidelines, focus groups, or the minimalist police. Design in the 90s was bold because it wasn't trying to please everyone. It was experimental, expressive, and unapologetically human.
That's a fact, though. Like, everything back then, it was like, there were certain things that was taboo. Yes, I get it. We were still, with certain things in society, I get it. We were probably still, I guess you could say, cavemen, right? But when you really think about it, like the 90s and the early 2000s, I honestly feel like that era or those time periods, like, were the most fairest time periods, in my opinion. Because you gotta think about it, like he said, like, everything was just if you said something wrong, right? Like, if you said something that was maybe controversial, you would have still got checked, but it wasn't like where, it was so offensive, like, oh my God, and then you gotta get canceled and all that bull crap. It was like, if you was like wrong and you said something offensive, you got correct. And if you said something that was like something that was factual, but it was something you don't say out loud, you wouldn't get really commend for it, but you definitely would get a silent pat on the back, because back then everything was like, like he said, like, everything was so, humanly fair for everybody. It wasn't like, it wasn't like bad for everybody. I feel like everybody got the jokes, whether it was against your religion or my religion, against your creed, my creed, like, it didn't matter. Like, everybody was kind of all in the same melting pot for the most part. And I feel like it was a simpler time period. I feel like everything was just fair for everybody. Hell, even Black Friday, when you think about it, like, Black Friday back then compared to now, like, and I'm talking about even the rough days where people were actually fighting and all that stuff. Like, people don't do that nowadays, which is, I give credit to humanity. Thank God we don't do stupid stuff like that. Like, but even back then, like, Black Fridays or special event sales or whatever, it was different. Like, it was still a fun time. Like, without the fighting and all that stuff, it was still a fun time. It was like, the spirit of the holidays was there.
From the games we played and the movies we watched to the cars we drove and the websites we built, everything had one thing in common: character. I still remember the Christmas of '96, jumping from a 16-bit Mega Drive to a 3D PlayStation wasn't just a technical leap, it felt like stepping into a bright future. And today we're going to unpack why the 90s looked so cool, and why the freedom of that decade gave rise to visuals that still resonate with us today. The 90s didn't just see in new consoles. It saw a leap in how games looked, felt, and were designed.
Definitely did.
We started the decade with the Super Nintendo. 16-bit graphics that were colourful, detailed, and expressive.
Yes, it was.
Think Super Mario World or Street Fighter 2. These were technical marvels using clever sprite work to convey depth on a flat plane. Alongside the SNES, we had 8-bit systems lingering, mostly the NES and handhelds like the Game Boy. They were simpler, more abstract, but deeply influential. Pokemon Red, Yellow.
I ain't gonna lie, like, see, I started with Nintendo, even though my first gaming era was Super Nintendo. But I started with Nintendo because I had older brothers. I was the baby of 3 boys. So, you know, I got to play the older stuff, right? So it was amazing, man. Like, because Nintendo at one point and enjoying it still, like, we didn't care, like, we was having a great time and nobody judged you for it. Like, nobody was like back then being like, oh, you didn't get the Super Nintendo, you're still playing that old 8-bit crap or whatever. Like, no, people still wanted the original Nintendo. I mean, like I said, until the Super Nintendo came out and mostly everybody got it, even us, we upgraded after a while. But I just feel like it was just like, it's just nostalgia to think about all those times, like, you know, just the 2-player controller, all your friends at home, bikes outside the front yard. It's just nothing tops that anymore. Nothing nowadays tops that. I'm sorry, you kids nowadays are just missing out on the best things in life. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Blue would eventually define a whole generation. By the mid-90s, consoles like the Sony PlayStation and the Nintendo 64 redefined what was possible. Suddenly we moved from 2D landscapes to fully 3D worlds.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, I remember that Christmas of '96 so vividly. It's when I got my PlayStation.
And even us, we was late on the PlayStation because, like, we got Sega Saturn first before we got PlayStation. Then PlayStation blew Sega Saturn out the water pretty much, and then we got the PlayStation. But even then, like, even then, we was still playing the Super Nintendo while we was like when we had the Sega Saturn, because Super Nintendo, we had a lot more games for the Super Nintendo, I think. I mean, we had a good amount of games for the Sega Saturn too, but I feel like we had a lot more for the Super Nintendo, and I feel like Super Nintendo games was always more replay value. Like, they always had you know how many times I played Super Mario World, like, even though it came with the system, or if yours didn't, whatever. But the point is, you've been playing it since you bought it, right? And it's like, how many times have you came back to that game when you was a child? Like, no matter how many times you beat it, no matter how many times you unlocked everything, how many times you came back to that game, right? And I came back to that game numerous of times, more than any game I played on the Sega Saturn. I'm gonna be honest with you. So, it's just they don't make things like they used to no more. I swear, it sucks.
Jump from the Mega Drive
That
really
sound like
was
an old
unmatched.
bitter bastard or anything.
These were more than just polygons, though. It changed gameplay, storytelling, and immersion. PS1's Final Fantasy VII gave players cinematic sequences that had never existed before.
Facts.
Tomb Raider introduced a female protagonist navigating three-dimensional architecture with groundbreaking camera angles. Even early 3D had its quirks.
Spyro,
jagged polygons, low-res textures, and
glitchy
glitchy movement. But these
great
weren't
platform
flaws.
game.
They were the visual language of experimentation. Developers were learning in real time what 3D could actually do. It gave games a unique aesthetic that just will never be replicated
Man,
today.
put your feet away, bro.
At one
He's over
stage, you
here,
could
feet
only
out.
get advanced graphics in arcades. Whilst it was still more
Damn,
advanced,
is that
the rise
Daytona?
of...
What's that called? That was called I think Daytona Raceway, right? Something like that. I forget, but I remember we had that for Sega Saturn. If that's the same game I'm thinking about, it looks like it. It does look like it. It's a long time ago for me. I think that is that game was actually fun because it actually gave you wear and tear on your car and shit. It was kind of cool. I mean, I guarantee if I play it now, I'll be like, this shit sucks. But, like, back then, that shit was amazing. Like,
home consoles,
that
PC
one in the
gaming was pushing
NASCAR
high
for
resolutions
PlayStation on the
and
very
3D
first PlayStation
acceleration.
was like amazing.
PC
bro.
games like Diablo, StarCraft, and Quake pushed experimentation even further. By the late 90s, we had 8-bit, 16, 32, and 64-bit graphics coexisting.
Man, what game was that called?
Giving the decade a layered
Superman 64?
experimental...
Oh my god, that was one of the worst. You know what's funny? Comment below if you ever got past the training, because I never got past the fucking training. Never, not once. I literally probably rented that game twice before I ended up. I think I ended up buying it or stealing it. I'll admit it. I ain't gonna lie. When I was a little kid, I was a little bastard, and I don't remember if we bought it or I stole it or something. But I remember having it at one point in my life, and I remember never getting past the freaking tutorial. Like I could never get past this section with the rings. It was the most hardest game you could fucking think of. And honestly, the game probably sucked anyway because Superman sucks as a character. So there's that.
Aesthetic.
But
this meant the 90s wasn't just a decade of gaming; it was a visual evolution. And this technical leap shaped the entire aesthetic of
game
our
art too. I know I keep pausing. I'm sorry. I know we got to get through this video, but like, it's just so much shit is hitting me because like I remember game art, the boxes for the game arts were like even when PlayStation 3 and 2, like I'll say 2 was art, but it had great art covers too. But like 3 and 4 and 5, like man, the art covers is like whack, man. It's like whatever, bro. Who cares? But back then for Super Nintendo, Sega. All the Dreamcast, like those art covers was official, bro.
From graphics to marketing and even the way kids imagine the future. The 90s cinematic world was bold.
Can't go wrong with the movie.
Filmmakers blended practical effects with emerging CGI to create stylized, immersive worlds. Jurassic Park's lifelike dinosaurs, Toy Story's fully 3D animation, and The Matrix's iconic green-tinged cyberpunk aesthetic were all about pushing boundaries.
Shout out to Stanley.
Some of the greatest movies ever made were in the 90s. Let's take Home Alone as an example. When was a film made like this in the last 25 years? Not just in terms of creative genius, but its distinct aesthetic. The colours, the storytelling, the actual way that it was filmed. It had texture, charm, and a visual identity that you just don't see anymore. And
that's a fact too, because like, think about the movies nowadays, right? Like you could watch these movies and a lot of them be, $1 million made movies and they're fucking trash, burning hot fire. And, think about the movies back then. I'm pretty sure some of them cost definitely, a couple million or high millions. But they were like, to me, like those movies back then, they were lifelong lasting, like feel good. No matter it was action, no matter it was comedy, no matter it was sad. Like, the 90s movies produced so much aura. I hope I'm using that right, but like I feel like that's the word I want to use is aura. Like they like you could like perfectly that right. Like American Pie, you could put on American Pie, and I guarantee you'll have a fucking memory pop up in your head, and you're like, wow, that was a great time of my life. Like I remember watching American Pie for the first time. I probably was like 8 years old. I want to say when that shit came out, maybe 7 years old. I know, shouldn't have been watching that, but shout out to my mother. She was actually a very, lenient person, a very lenient parent. But, even watching American Pie, you have the lines that are memorable, the characters are memorable, everything. Lethal Weapon 4. I was just literally watching Lethal Weapon 4, probably like a week or two ago, and just thinking about Lethal Weapon 4, and I was watching and I was just remembering the lines and cracking up, and I just kept thinking as a kid, like, man, I remember watching it as a kid and just loving Lethal Weapon 4. Like, it's just nothing compares to what it was back then because there's no heart. I just feel like there's no heart to it. There's no respect anymore. Like everything's just about like, fuck you, give me money, right? Or like, hopefully, I'm gonna put out this great story, but then the end is always shit. Or I'm gonna just put out this creative work of art that I call art, and not ever be known as like a nostalgic movie. Like even B movies back in the 90s. I'm gonna be honest, even B movies back in the 90s. My brother was just talking about that, like because he was talking about the Death Proof movies and all that stuff. How he went to the theaters to see that shit, and it was just like amazing for him at the time, and. But even B movies, like back in the 90s, from certain B movie companies, they would give us movies, right? Like I mean, I never seen movies like Maniac Cop, but like people loved Maniac Cop, right? Back in those days. I never seen I never seen all the was it Pumpkinheads, or I probably seen the first Pumpkinhead when I was a kid, but I don't remember watching the other ones. But people love Pumpkinhead, right? Like, so it's like back then, it's like no matter it was a B movie, major movie, A-listers, B-listers, if it was fucking made with some passion and creativity and some type of like, even when it was cheesy, like movies like Con Air was cheesy as shit, but like people love it to this day. Why? Because it gave out a nostalgic aura. It gives you a memory. It gives you something that you watched when you was a child and you was like, man, this is a great, great movie, or it gives you something to remember when you was probably with your brothers or sisters or mother or father, uncle, aunt, whoever. and it just gives you that. Nowadays, like I can only hope that these kids watch these movies nowadays and they think about it when they're 36 and 46. They can feel how we felt watching our movies in the 90s and early 2000s.
Even smaller films leaned into design. Teen movies, comedies, and action flicks used bold color palettes and playful set design. 10 Things I Hate About You and American Pie turned bedrooms, schools, malls, and arcades into stages for visual storytelling and often hyper-stylized to evoke
kids
energy.
And the pop kids.
Watching a film in the cinema was a real experience. I remember watching Flubber, Lion King, and The Mask as some of my first movies, and I was mesmerized. And then 12 months later, you eventually bought the VHS tapes, and the slightly grainier setting just added to the charm.
Look at that TV. Look
Special
at that
effects weren't just technical, they were expressive tools.
Like awesome.
The 90s were the golden age of experiential branding. Fast food wasn't just a meal, it was a curated event.
Yeah.
Stepping into McDonald's in 1995 didn't just feel like entering a sterile corporate office, it felt like a high-energy playground. The physical spaces were a masterclass in sensory design. We had the play place, a miniature world of primary color tunnels and ball.
It was never that clean, but
inside the interiors used a palette of highly
saturated
saturated reds and yellows, specifically designed to trigger energy. And
Hamburger was on my guy too. I ain't gonna lie. I don't know why. I've always been like that. So that's sad that I've realized that now. Like I've always liked the bad guys more than I like the good guys.
From the character-themed chairs to the game stations, every square inch was about total immersion.
Maybe.
Even the Happy Meal toys weren't just plastic;
Jesus,
they were
Furbies,
cultural events.
Beanie Babies, yeah.
Toy Story, Jurassic Park.
Y'all don't understand. Like anybody who was born after 7, I would say, or 95. Even we could even go as 95, 97. You would never understand what it was to go through the Beanie Baby craze era. Like that shit was like, even as a child, that shit was just
Yo-Yos, Hercules. You didn't just eat, you lived in that brand's universe for 45 minutes.
Yeah,
and Pizza Hut carried a similar weight. Friday nights were a ritual defined by red roof architecture and glowing neon
I love those
signs.
Pizza Huts too.
Inside,
they need to bring those back.
Pizza
Pizza Hut was never the same.
Checkered tablecloths, the smell of grease, and the distinct click of arcade machines.
Facts.
This was the era of the bucket program. A brilliant psychological hook that turned reading books into free pizza.
Which, not to turn this into conspiracy theory now, but like, yeah, if you look into the bucket programs and all those other book fair, like, sponsors or whatever the hell they were, all those book companies that was in our libraries when we were kids. Yeah, there's some deep stuff behind it if you actually look into all that stuff.
Cementing brand loyalty before we even hit puberty.
Damn, had those.
They had great character partnerships with Casper, Beauty and the Beast, and Land Before Time.
Yeah, we had that. We had those.
Today, these chains have franchised into efficiency focus.
My mom definitely is one thing I remember as a kid growing up. Like my mom always, at least once a month, I think it was, or like at least it was either once a month or once every Friday or some shit like that. We used to go to Pizza Hut, bro. It was like the best time of my fucking life. I used to love Pizza Hut.
Voids.
That's the reason I love
Designed
Pizza
for
Hut.
delivery and high
I eat
turnover,
pizza every day.
and stripping away the visual excitement once made them icons. But the real battlefield for brands was on the TV screen. 90s advertising wasn't something you skipped unless you needed a toilet in between your TV program where you try and sprint back right before it started. Saturday morning cartoons weren't just shows. They were delivery systems for a masterclass in kinetic marketing. Advertising in the 90s used a visual language of extreme pacing. Think of the Game Genie advert. It was chaos, fast-paced, and used a jagged, extreme editing style that mirrored the rebellious energy of the decade.
That's a fact.
We had the surrealism of McDonald's.
We were just talking about that recently about how like Game Shark, like back in the day, like around the PS1 days or whatever, like they used to come with like demos. Like we used to, like if you order, like back in the day we had Game Informer. Well, we still have Game Informer now, but back in the day it was definitely more heavily invested in. Let's put it that way. And they would come with like demos, shout out to everybody who remember that. Comment below if you remember that. But like I remember we used to give out demos, or we used to like get them from I think McDonald's if I'm not mistaken, or you get them ordered to your house. Like it was always like game demos, and it was always like fun as hell, bro. Like, but a lot of those game demos, man, it's like Game Genie, all that stuff, man. Game Shark, that stuff was like it was like we cheated, but it was great cheat codes, man. It was great.
Mac tonight. And Moonheaded Lounge that felt more like a short film than a burger ad. And we had the What's Up Budweiser advert that transcended our entire generation. These weren't just commercials, they were micro stories. Whether it's the over-the-top slime-filled aesthetics of Nickelodeon promos or the theatrical energy of the serialized, the goal wasn't just to sell a product, it was to own your attention. They used bold primary palettes and playful distorted typography as strategic visual cues. They knew
Look at
that the
Lunchables
world
back in the day. Look
without a
how much
skip
shit they
button
gave
had
you.
to
Now they
reward
give
your
you
gaze.
Lunchables is cheap now, man. Those bastards. They'll give you like probably like at best like 4 to maybe like 6. I think, or not, probably less than that, like 5. Like it don't even. I feel like they don't even give you the right amount of crackers to go with the right amount of meat or nothing, bro. Like back then, you used to be able to like, double it, right? Like put a cheese or a slice of turkey or ham, cheese, and then another slice of turkey or something with a cracker, and make it like a hefty John. Nowadays, you gotta really sample that shit. You gotta just put one cracker, one turkey, one cheese, eat it like that, and that's it. Like because they ain't giving you much.
Brands were
Don't give you much
immersive,
no more.
theatrical, turning a 30-second spot into a small, unforgettable spectacle. We weren't just consumers, we were the audience.
Squeezers.
The ultimate icon of this shift was the iMac G3. By releasing a computer in Bondi Blue, Tangerine, and Blueberry, Apple made a radical statement that technology could be fun. It used translucent polycarbonate plastics to demystify the machine, turning a workspace tool into a cultural centerpiece. This translucent trend trickled down into everything,
I had that Game Boy.
from Game Boy Colors to Pages, revealing the internal circuitry as if to say,
I feel like Pages died. To me, I feel like when I was growing up, like Pages was more starting to die out. Like people had them, but like they were dying out. Like I feel like the Pages was more of an 80s, early 90s. Like 'cause I was born exactly 90. So like by the time I was like 5, which was 95, I feel like 95 to like maybe 97. In my opinion, I mean I didn't have one, but I feel like nobody really had a pager like that. Like everybody had that phone though. I feel like everybody had that phone, but us. Like me and my brothers, we never had that phone.
future is transparent. And I genuinely believe this will be the future of hardware. How wrong was I?
Did have the Game Boys.
Gaming hardware did follow the same path. While the PS1 brought a sleek industrial grade that made 3D gaming feel growing up, Nintendo and Sega leaned into fluorescent candy-colored aesthetics. Even the controllers weren't shy. Transparent shells and quirky ergonomic designs turned interacting with a console into a sensory experience. Portable media players were the final cornerstone. The Sony Discman and Walkman didn't just play music, they transformed it into a mobile performance. These devices were engineered with metallic finishes and oversized physical buttons. You didn't just click a song on the screen, you felt the mechanical click of the lid, the weight of the disc spinning, and the tactile feedback of a physical volume wheel. Even headphones came in neon green and hot pink, reinforcing a playful, individualized identity. From the Virtual Boy's bold and failed attempt at VR to the Talk Boy's physical hardware hack.
Yeah, I remember my older brother got one of those. My older brother, shout out to Reset the Game. He had that VR one. I ain't gonna lie, he wanted that so bad. He finally got him one. I remember that too. Or our mom. I always say my mom, but our mom got him one. That was funny as hell though. And I had one of these. Actually, probably around the same time that he got that. Probably got that, but I ain't had the see-through one. I had the original Talk Boy, the original one from the Home Alone, the Home Alone movie.
Every oversized button was intentional.
I ain't gonna lie, I used to record
they were designed to excite. Technology was finally aspirational. Wow. These weren't just tools, they were iconic design objects that proved tech could have a personality. Even today, the sheer joy of interacting with a 90s gadget is a reminder of a decade that chose expression over efficiency. The 90s internet was not sleek, and it definitely wasn't corporate. It certainly wasn't designed to optimize for time on page or conversion funnels. It was a massive, creative Wild West. Early web platforms like GeoCities, Angelfire, and Tripod gave users something that we've almost entirely lost today: digital sovereignty. You didn't just fill out a profile template, you designed a world. Each neon background, low-res animated GIF, and scrolling marquee text reflected the raw personality and humor of its creator. Not the cold.
I ain't gonna lie to you, this part of the fucking video has got me like low-key emotional in my head, because I'm just like, wow, like I remember, like, man, wow, bro. Like I remember we used to collect those little Pepsi caps, to get the jet or the money or whatever the hell you got from it. Sorry, that's why I like the Pepsi. Where I remember, my mom loves Pepsi. She's a big Pepsi fan. My mom loves Pepsi, and we used to have a bunch of those shits. Look at the Space Jam site. It triggered a memory that I forgot about completely. That I remember going on that site, just fucking around with it. Even thinking about like the old like Cartoon Network site, right? Remember the old Cartoon Network game, like the games you used to play on there, like playing Sims on an old, not old. Well, I don't want to say old computer, but I guess you say old computer now, right? But in those times, playing The Sims or like Theme Hospital, bruh.
Logic of an algorithm.
Goated. That's all I can say.
This was the era of Web 1.0, where the visual language was built on HTML templates and frames. This created a rigid modular setting that users filled with visual noise.
That's crazy.
Your hit count at the bottom tracking every visitor like a badge of honor. Guest books for friends to leave a digital footprint, and autoplay MIDI songs that hit you the moment the page landed. These weren't bad design choices, they were expressions of freedom.
I was saying back then, just to mention all that, so back then it was different. Damn, eBay, I remember when eBay looked like that. But back then it was different too. Like there was no restrictions, there was no, rules, right? Or like anything that like, how do you say, prevented you. Like there was no walls, there was no firewall, like, in the sense of like preventing you to watch whatever. Like if you knew the site you want to go to, you can go there with no restrictions or nothing. Like it was so easy. It was crazy back then. You know what I'm saying? Like to like, you get an email or you go to eBay, just log into AOL or whatever it was, Hotmail. Some people had Hotmail, I had AOL. So like, it was so, like everything was just so easily accessible to go through online. The fact that we did have the few that we did have happen, right? The bad things that did happen throughout the years, I just feel like as open as it was like, man, I feel like people were way more responsible, like they knew like, okay, we can look up this stuff, but we're not going to do it, right? Or we can look up this stuff, we're not going to fucking act on it. And, depending on what it was, obviously. But, yeah, it was a different time period, man. I just have to say, it was a different time period. And I miss it so much. I miss it. Compared to what the shit we have nowadays from one side to another, it's bullshit. It's just like, take me back to where it was simple and great and full of colors and things was cheap and simple. You didn't need all this extra shit. You didn't have to buy into systems and games and equipment and then buy into another fucking amount of money to open up more of the game or more of the equipment. It's just ridiculous, bro. Like everything's just
Some corners of this era do remain frozen in time, offering a glimpse of the aesthetic in its purest form. Take Space Jam. This hasn't changed since 1996.
Really?
With storytile background, looping character gifts, and navigation menu that feels completely alien to modern UX sensibilities, It remains a masterpiece of 90s optimism. Even the corporate giants of the time, from Nickelodeon to early gaming portals like IGN, embraced the chaos.
Yeah.
The chaos wasn't a mistake, the chaos was the point. By the late 90s, a very specific type of wacky postmodernism had steeped into the DNA of the decade. This wasn't just style for style's sakes, it was playfulness as a philosophy. It was a revolt against mid-century rules of form follows function, where everything had to be neat, serious, and predictable.
Yeah,
Designers and brands embraced exaggerated proportions.
It was like so easy to find shit, like it was like this era had this era had that. It was like everybody took pride in their jobs, everybody was happy to go to work. Everybody was happy to live the life that they had. Middle class was actually thriving. Lower class wasn't as poor or as fucked up it is nowadays. Upper class was rich, but they wasn't like, asshole rich. Like, it was just like, I feel like everything was such just simpler times. Like, if you, like, even now, I go to the mall, right? I go to the mall, I go to a Pacific Mall that everybody used to go to back in my day, right? And people still go to it, but it's like, it's different. It's so fancier now. It's like a fake ass mini Beverly Hills mall, and I hate it because it's like, I remember when the food court used to be a fucking battleground at one point, right? Or like just being able to see the old Disney store that we used to have and walk by that and be cool, or just to even see how Hot Topic and Spencer's used to be. Nowadays, that shit is like, to me, fucking bunch of posers. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, y'all ain't real Hot Topic shoppers. Y'all ain't real fucking Spencer shoppers. Like, get out of here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
Memphis inspired geometry and clashing palettes.
But it's not the same.
Polka dot spirals, slime textures.
I get that it's not going to be the same, but at the same time, it's like why did we steer off from all the good things that made us good, or made us feel good, and it's like now we're stuck in this shitty timeline. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
checkerboard patterns and neon gradients weren't just accidents. They were deliberate disruptions meant to grab attention in an increasingly crowded media landscape. You saw it everywhere. The squiggles on the Nickelodeon device, the tubular primary colored furniture in arcades, the fluorescent signage in fast food play places, and the strange asymmetrical chairs in your bedroom. Typography went rogue too. Clean serifs gave way to distressed and liquid fonts, dripped or bouncing across cereal boxes, VHS covers, and TV idents. Every logo, font, and visual element became a small act of defiance against minimalization and efficiency. But by the early to mid-2000s, the era of unconstrained improvisation hit a wall. Intuition-led design gave way to data-driven templates. Algorithms dictated layouts, minimalism replaced neon chaos, and efficiency replaced wonder. The wacky postmodern playground was traded for a minimalist void, easier to navigate but far harder to remember and almost impossible to feel. The 90s aesthetic endures because it dared to experiment. Every curve, every colour clash, and every slime screen squiggle wasn't a mistake. It was a tiny act of freedom. And maybe that's why, even decades later, we don't...
Freedom, boy. Freedom. Like, I'm thinking about it like, man, freedom is a fucking understatement of what we used to have back then. Like, I feel like we had just, imagine being a sim character, but you're not being controlled. Like, you literally you're free to do whatever you wanted, as long as you don't do nothing stupid, drastic, selfish, crazy, or demonic. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and where the fuck did we go wrong, society? Where the fuck did we go wrong? Where?
Just feel nostalgic for the 90s. We admire its audacity. The 90s were a decade of radical automotive rebirth.
Cars.
We witnessed a total death of the sharp, angular, folded paper design of the 80s.
Cars like they used to,
and cars didn't just become rounder, they became biological. This wasn't a fashion trend, it was the birth of the computer-aided design as a dominant force in the industry.
Yeah.
For the very first time, engineers could model airflow, refine drag coefficients, and simulate structural performance digitally before a single clay prototype was ever scraped.
Those Subis are nice, though.
This shifted the entire philosophy of car manufacturing from guesswork to precision engineering. You could see this biodesign revolution across the board. Look at the Honda NSX, a car designed with a cockpit inspired by the F-16 fighter jet, offering unparalleled visibility and an aerodynamic profile that made Ferraris look archaic. We saw the McLaren F1, which used a gold leaf-lined engine bay for heat reflection, and the Dodge Viper, which is a brutal curved masterpiece of V10 muscle meets modern styling.
Is that a Viper?
Even the JDM icons, the Subaru WRX and the Nissan Skyline GTR R34 showcased a mix of sleek dynamic curves and performance-focused aggression that was engineered for the wind tunnel. But this wasn't just reserved for elite supercars. The curvature revolution trickled down into driveways of everyday people. The Honda Civic evolved from a boxy 80s commuter into a fluid, rounded shape that felt like it was moving while it was standing still. These cars were lighter, faster, and more structurally rigid because CAD allowed for precise manufacturing tolerances that humans simply couldn't achieve by hand in previous decades. The marketing in the 90s leading into this new aesthetic with hyper-stylized lens.
Look how beautiful
cars weren't just photographed on showroom floor.
God, like they don't even make cars like that anymore. Like, they legitly don't even, like, half these cars, these new cars, man, they look like shit. Like, I don't know. I like some of the bigger body stuff, so I like the Wagoneer. I think the Wagoneer is sexy, you know. The remake of the Wagoneer is pretty nice. Surprised enough, I hate electric cars, but I don't know why. I started to fall in love with the electric Challenger. So, like, some cars catches my eye in these newer models and stuff, but I just feel like there's nothing like an old-fashioned, you know, 90s, early 2000s, you know, those type of models of cars, and the Subis, the Hondas, like, it's just, man, like, I love being able to, like, to have those cars and just trick those cars, you know what I'm saying? You could trick them any way you want to.
They were bathed in saturated sunsets, placed beside mirror light
even
lakes.
Stock like those, like the Lamborghinis, the Dodge Vipers, like, so even the Subis, like those, even stock, the Lexus back in those times, stock was still like, what? Looked at amazing. The Lexus back in like the early 2000s, man, what? You pull up in that shit, bro, niggas thought you had money. Simple as that, bro.
Or filmed on winding coaster roads to highlight the play of light over those complex new reflections. It was a visual promise that technology was finally catching up to our imaginations.
I'm saying those cars are
the 90s wasn't just about cars that looked cool. These were technological marvels that married engineering innovation and unapologetic, bold design language that we've almost entirely lost in today's era of generic, safe SUVs.
I like that style of that era.
So I imagine you're sat here watching this now thinking, why did this all stop? Why did we trade the colour and the 3D experimentation for the minimalist void of today? The short answer is for efficiency. As the internet matured and global corporations grew, designs became a science rather than an art.
Yeah.
We entered the era of A/B testing and frictionless user experiences, attempting to put customers at the heart of the journey, yet failing to understand what that actually meant. Bold colours were replaced by safe neutrals that wouldn't offend the global audience, and unique architectural quirks were ironed out to make buildings easier to clean and cheaper to maintain. We optimised the joy right out of the room. But there's a reason 90s aesthetics are exploding on the internet right now. Whether it's the revival of low-poly PS1 style horror games, or the obsession with Fruitiger Aero and the Global Village coffeehouse visuals, we are collectively hitting a breaking point with minimalism. We're starting to realise that a world designed by data is efficient, but it's so boring. The 90s looked cool because it was a decade that just dared to be different. It was the last era where the human touch was more important than an algorithm. Maybe it's time we stop making everything look clean and start making it look alive again. I don't know about you, but I'd trade 1,000 modern minimalist cafes for a 1996 piece up with a glow neon sign and sit-down arcade in a heartbeat.
I would trade this now for that any day. And I know you probably think, oh, you're crazy, you're just talking out your head. No, I'm serious, dude. Like, I mean, I wouldn't trade my PlayStation. Don't get me wrong, I love gaming, but I also love retro gaming. So it's like, and it's crazy to be honest with you, because I feel like I played more retro games, or I would like to get more into retro games than I would with these newer games. Hell, I'll be honest, I'd rather buy independent games, you know, people who are independently making games more than these AAA countries like fucking EA, you know, which count your fucking days, EA. I swear, I look forward to the day when that building fucking collapsed one day. I really do. But, you know, there's just, I'd rather go to the smaller guys than the bigger guys. So it's like, I don't know. It's just, things have changed throughout the years. And this video just shows you, like, man, we lost it somewhere. Somewhere down the line, we lost creativity. We lost, you know, the great humanity mindset, you know, the commercials are not even this. Like, think about the commercials from back then, right? The infomercials from back then till now. Bro, I miss the commercials back then. The Gushers commercials, the Lollipop commercials, the Mr. Isle, right? Like, you know, all those commercials, man. I miss all those stuff. And it's just, you know, it's crazy how it is, bro. Anyway, it's just crazy.